I was wondering if you could explain where we're at in the process of closing the men's central jail.
So, Men's Central Jail is a antiquated, falling apart, horrific place for the people who are sentenced there, for the men and women who work there in the sheriff's department. And as you know, a couple of years ago, the board made the decision to close it. The question is how, and how do we do it right and well? Where do we divert people who are already sentenced? How do we create the program that the county did, Alternatives to Incarceration, to acknowledge the upstream issues that lead people to being locked up? Far too many for reasons that don't justify going to jail. The number of people that are in jail pre-trial just because they don't have the resources to bail out.
Almost
like
half the
almost half
population.
the population.
Yeah.
The number of people who are serving in Men's Central Jail who are suffering from severe mental illness. Why? Because when we see someone having a mental health crisis on the street, what do? We call 911. Who shows up? The police. Where do they take them? To jail. As opposed to having other systems in place to deal with the needs of the severely mentally ill. So the board, this past Tuesday, I've got a motion coming up 1st of May to create beds, to fund and build community-based beds to deal with what we call the P3, P4 population, those suffering severe mental illness who are in county jail, as well as unlocked bed facilities through our Office of Diversion and Reentry, ODR, which are community-based settings that have had amazing success, 90% success rate. The recidivism rate is lower than any other carceral system. So what we've got to do is fund these alternatives, stand them up in the community so we have a place for people to go and to be instead of Men's Central Jail.
And that's what you're doing beforehand, correct? So, because I think a lot of people, especially from the outside looking in, like even my question was like, well, are they just going to close the jail and just let everybody out? Or is like there going to be programs in place? Because that was my biggest concern, is that there are all these different areas that need to be addressed. We had, No Justice LA. We had someone come in and talk to them recently. We were talking about this, and it's a big concern because, especially what you see on the news, they're like, well, they're going to close the jail and everybody's going to be on the streets and we don't know where they're going to go. So I'm glad that, you're speaking to that, because people at home need to know, like, okay, well, we're not just closing the jail. We're lifting
alternatives.
Creating alternatives that actually work, that we've seen work, rather than just like, oh, they're going out on the streets.
And we also have to educate the public about who's in jail and why. And so when we talk about, when the former sheriff said, like 2 sheriffs ago, LA County Men's Central Jail is the largest mental health facility in the country, that should say something to people.
Yes.
And those 9x9 cells are no place for someone suffering from severe mental illness.